Well, Shabbat Shalom, friends. Thank you for sharing your Shabbat morning with Ner Tamid. At this time of year, I give myself a few minutes to remember the Passovers of my childhood. And for those who were raised in this tradition and have those childhood memories, if they are sweet, just take a moment to bring them to your heart. I wasn't raised traditionally with two seders, so my first seder would always be, at least through 8th grade, our model seder that we had at the Hebrew Academy. And the little plates would come out, and the little pieces of gefilte fish, and the little bits of charoset, the sweet apples and walnut combination. And we must have had a little matzah, certainly. And we would gather around tables, and we would sing Dayenu and practice the 4 questions and tell a modified story and sing songs. And it was just, at least in all of the reverential memories I allow myself, just the sweetest time. I remember those model seders as having a sense of promise, the parsley and the salt water and the little flavors and tastes, not just of the food, but something in the air that was special. And I wonder what it was like a few days ago to be a Ukrainian Jewish teenager and to have a special guest at their model seder at the Beit Simcha Jewish School in Kyiv, when the special guest at the head of the table was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What a model seder. The ones at the Hebrew Academy were memorable, but wow. President Zelensky has met with Jewish leaders many times in the 2 years since Russia brought war to their country, but he hadn't met formally with Jewish teenagers until just a couple of days ago. And when asked what he thought Passover is all about, President Zelensky said, "I think first of all, it is about freedom." Another student poured a cup of Kedem grape juice for him, and a loaded Seder plate was in view as he gave his answer. He said, "Freedom is probably the most sensitive and important thing we have. It is cherished by every nation that has values, and we need to stand up for this freedom. It is important that you do this today, that you talk about it, and that you are being taught this." After meeting with the students, President Zelensky spoke with rabbis affiliated with Chabad, which operates the school and much of Jewish life in Ukraine. He met with them inside a bunker built at the school, following Russia's February 24th, 2022 invasion. There, the president drew connections between the plight of the ancient Israelites of the Passover story and contemporary Ukrainians, as well as between Ukrainians and Israelis, both facing current wars that their countries did not start. Many in Ukraine and Israel will celebrate Passover, the holiday of freedom, in shelters, he said. Zelensky said that both Ukrainians and Israelis must remain free people. We trust and pray that we will see our own miracles in Ukraine and in Israel. During the visit, The president got a copy of the first Passover Haggadah translated into Ukrainian, symbolizing the efforts of many Ukrainian Jews to switch from Russian, which was until recently the language of the overwhelming majority of Ukrainian Jews, to the state language as an act of national affirmation and defiance against Russia. The Ukrainian president praised the Chabad rabbis and emissaries who have refused to leave Ukraine after the start of the war, and he expressed pride about the fact that the last Chabad Lubavitch rabbi, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, was born in the city of Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine. Yesterday, April 19th, was the 122nd anniversary of the Rebbe's birth, according to the Jewish calendar. It was also April 19th, when it was Erev Pesach in 1943, the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. President Zelensky received matzah made at the Tiferet Hamatzot Bakery in Dnipro, a major Ukrainian city that is relatively close to the front lines, but which is also a Chabad stronghold. Chabad rabbis plan to hold public seders in Ukraine's 41 biggest cities, and together the seders are expected to draw more than 20,000 Jews. What a model seder for the ages. Passover is a holiday of questioning. It is a holiday most known by its name Pesach and Passover, which has a lot of layers, but it is also known as the Festival of Spring and the Festival of Freedom, Chag HaCherut. In the prayer that we say for our country every week and that we just said a couple of minutes ago, the word freedom appears in every paragraph. And notice how President Zelensky emphasized the theme of freedom in his remarks to the Jewish teenagers. Some people, understandably this year, are asking how we can speak of freedom when we are against a backdrop of such pain and when more than 100 hostages stolen so cruelly from Israel, so many of them dancing and praying for peace. When they remain in captivity, how can we sing of freedom? But Jewish tradition says we have to dig deep and remember not just the Passover seders of our youths, if we were fortunate enough to have sweet ones and that we were blessed to be raised in relative peacetime. Before the world came to our door with the technology that we have, we might have been able to have the illusion of being far from the conflicts of the world if they weren't on our doorstep, but we don't have that freedom anymore. So the very notion of freedom is changing all the time. Fundamental freedoms are under attack in this country. Freedom of speech is threatened. Freedom of the press and of assembly, the First Amendment freedoms that we cherish so dearly, they are fragile and not ever to be taken for granted. So we have to sing and speak of freedom, because even at times when we are not feeling physically or legally as free as we want, it is our words and our prayers and our wishes and our singing that may one day bring about the kind of freedom with discipline that is what Judaism is all about. So as we're preparing for Passover and thinking of one-of-a-kind model seders with a Jewish leader on a world stage who has been so brave and so human, I'm thinking of another seder that took place in the Kovno ghetto as we are memorializing the Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach, Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. All of these things collide in these few days. But there was a scene in the Kovno Ghetto in the early 1940s when, at a service preparing for Passover, the leader of the prayers, an old and pious Jew, wondered how he could say any kind of a blessing where we would thank God for not making us slaves, where we would celebrate freedom. Jews who were so enslaved and in bondage. But the rabbi said, "Heaven forbid that we should abolish our prayers, giving thanks for freedom now. Our enemies wish to make us their slaves. They may control our bodies, but they do not own our souls. When we say the blessings of gratitude for freedom, we demonstrate that even here, even in bondage, we see ourselves as free people, temporarily in captivity, awaiting God's redemption." Rabbi Sachs teaches that the great prophets asked the question of where is God? And they only ever received a fragment of an answer. They asked, where is the redemption about which Malachi prophesied? But Rabbi Sachs teaches that answer was given by the rabbi in the Kovno Ghetto. God really only has one dwelling place in this finite physical universe, and that is the human heart. If we banish God from our heart, tragedy comes. When rulers set themselves in place of God, they begin by taking other people's freedoms and end by taking other people's lives. There is a direct line from tyranny to idolatry to bloodshed. But the greatest defense is the knowledge that above all earthly powers is the supreme sovereign of sovereigns. No absolute ruler has ever succeeded totally in extinguishing the spark in the souls of a people that expresses itself in a passion for freedom. It is why he wrote, and we miss him, I miss him so much, all tyrannies have failed and always will. Where was God in the ghetto? In the hearts of those who, though they were prisoners in the valley of the shadow of death, insisted on saying the blessing of free human beings. Their story did not end happily, but they left us this legacy: the knowledge that the human spirit cannot be killed, and that therefore freedom will always triumph in the final battle. As we continue to pray for freedom for our captives held in such unspeakable brutality, if they are still with us, please may they come home soon. And until we know differently, we will hope and pray that they are alive and will recover and be emissaries for good for the rest of their lives. For those of us feeling not free in this painful and difficult time, let us continue to say the blessings of free people. While our hearts are free, tyranny will never win. We continue to pray and hope for freedom with love, freedom with discipline, freedom with faith, freedom for the soul and for the spirit. As we celebrate Chag HaChirut, the festival of freedom, Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so. Shabbat Shalom.